Alright guys, welcome to Red's Resort. This is just going to be a quick rundown of what Benoit was talking about in Star Citizen Live last night. Just in case you don't have a couple of hours to go through the whole thing and just want a quick summary. So basically Benoit and Jared sat down and started off the conversation going over the previous year. It's been a pretty solid year. And in that time they feel like they've built up quite a good foundation for all the underlying tech that we think we're going to be dealing with moving forward. There was a lot of performance improvements, there was less turbulence than anticipated with the addition of server mission, and it brought us lots of things like server recovery and the fact that crashes would be isolated by area and not affect the rest of the population. It also brought in larger player counts, allowed us to travel to 2 new solar systems, and likely a large number of other things as well. It's looking like the Rock Cracker mission will be coming in March, possibly with a scattering of service stations throughout Nyx. The Castra system will be the next solar system added to the game. They've been testing the foundations of dynamic meshing, which they termed quasi-dynamic meshing, and this test went somewhat successfully and allows them to spin up and down servers depending on if any players are actually in that location. This would allow them to give the proper compute to tasks that are occurring in that area, and obviously should save on performance overall and allow it to be committed where it's needed. The year of playability came up, and they went over a lot of the good gains that the teams have made. The transit system was patched to the point it wasn't being considered pretty much unusable anymore. They hadn't rewrote the entire system at that point, but managed to make it self-healing in a way so that they can get it functioning and get the players moving around. They also froze a lot of the technology the content teams were working from. This allowed for a kind of stable plateau to build content from, and we've seen a lot of new locations and sometimes even creatures and bosses. They also made the switch to being able to spawn in the hangar. The weather came in, the jump gates were activated, bounty beacons got working again, quantum interdiction, the routing with maps and stuff obviously still has issues, and there are still some freight elevator things that we'll get to in a bit. Overall though, server FPS and cleanup seen a massive jump. Vulcan came in, mechs, we had comms with NPCs with faces playing on little video screens, and also the service that deals with event progress and it all getting tracked and stuff got locked in pretty good. And very early on there was the item recovery. Jared did, however, go on to acknowledge the level that the game still is inoperable, and how bad a state it can ultimately find itself in from time to time. As is usually the case, this was heartfelt and genuine, and there's still people having nightmares of a variety of descriptions all over the place. But it was good to point out the massive forward momentum a lot of these systems in the background have seen. And this has been due largely to the intense work done by these hero strike teams, slowly but surely turning the ship around, using a far more streamlined and systematic approach instead of just laying and fixing tracks as we all barreled along on the crazy train. Then we went a bit deeper into the whole new transit system they've been working on. So that's elevators and ship elevators, trains and trams and so on. This should be going into tech preview soon, hopefully. So no more trains in space unless it's intended. The first transport test got absolutely hammered into the ground by the QA teams and is functioning well at New Babbage for static targets like hotel elevators. Dynamic elevators would be the ones going to your hangar as it goes to an instance, and they've got that working as well under this new rewritten transit code. The team is now currently working on converting all of Area 18, hangars, hubs and trains, and if the tech preview goes well, it will then be moved on to everywhere else in the game. For freight elevators, these are still way more complicated than we can imagine apparently. Still some very egregious issues. Out of the 73 total issues, 51 have been resolved. One of the ones remaining is how things are being turned into Wicklow, and this is the primary thing that they are looking at. After that, lost items are a top priority. A golden rule that seems to have emerged is that players should never lose an item interacting with these systems, and I'm glad we're all agreed on that. Basically, different edge cases are getting chased down, such as apparently unstacking items from your inventory into your elevator is an issue, as a stack is seen as a single item. So when it's split out like that, the system then has to create individual items for each one. So they're looking into that. Item recovery tier 1 is on the horizon. Currently, when you look at your ace up, you're looking at a list of your entitlements, what it is and where it is. These don't live across patches. They are essentially created by CIG the first time you log in after a patch. It grabs your web purchases, your long-term persistence account, and creates your entitlement list. Long-term persistence is not an easy problem to solve, but the idea is to persist these items across the patches now, so they never get wiped and recreated at any point. So then the only way to lose a ship in the game will be if you don't have insurance on it. You will still have an entitlement to it, but you won't be able to claim it. This will go for FPS gear as well. Everything will live on an insurance ledger so that it can persist across patches and can be recovered. This will also address the removal of components and then reclaim of ship. This does not mean we will all have to start paying insurance. It will be a lot like it is now, and we will basically all just have LTI on everything. So that thing about you not having insurance so you can't claim your ship should never actually happen. But the system will be in place for the day that comes into play. Overall, they're looking to reduce the footprint of long-term persistence and are making big changes from the bottom up. They need to come up with a way to migrate, for example, a ship update from the old model to the new one, and you retain ownership whilst the ship keeps all the information about all of its relative parts throughout the patch change. They're working on a system that can prioritise data changes that are relevant information to migrate and stuff that isn't, so that everything else can just be dropped. So say the health of a Gladius nose had a 2% increase, that needs to transition to the new patch. The lights being on at the time it was stowed doesn't. Once this works, it means nothing will need recomputed or moved around between patches and can just be moved forward. But that is a longer term goal, and this will solve a ton of things involving compatibility between hotfixes and may even avoid a lot of that regression that we see almost every patch. But I added that bit myself in the vague hope that that's what that would mean. So yeah, don't quote me on that. We then moved into social, the ability to group with people, communicate, not communicate, organising orgs. They have formed a social strike team, and their only mission is to execute this plan. And even though the forward-facing social features haven't changed much to us looking at them in the game, the systems behind all that have been reinforced significantly. They have a block list working in the background, the comm link will go completely, and a social tab will replace it. Party info, friend or foe tracking, and a new chat widget will be among the first things we will see. A notifications overhaul, so everything isn't just popping up as critical info across the top of your screen. A party finder will be the next milestone, finding gunners for ships or finding friends to go and do an event or mission. After that, the org system will be implemented, so complete org management and chat, and even being able to create an org from the game as well. This will possibly tie into FPS and scanning radar, they said. And I think that means that if an org or party member scans an enemy, that info will be sent across to your friendlies, I think, which would be awesome. They went on to VoIP after that. Basically what's happened is it's been affected by the shard size increase. It was designed for 100 player shards. They're talking about possibly moving away from server chat altogether and going into regional chat, possibly even on multiple channels. Proximity chat as well, obviously, and player reporting that might involve automated help. What could possibly go wrong? Benoit had a few quality of life pet peeves, and one of them is managing binds for massive flight sim rigs and things like that. In particular, being able to bind the same action on multiple devices. Unfortunately, there's nothing coming soon on that. There's no strike team or anything, but slow work is going on in the background. His other thing was mission chains, or the lack thereof. He was saying that doing a single mission and then that being done is a bit linear, and they're working on a way to make this scalable. The current/old mission system was designed in a way that was limited severely and couldn't reward players and stuff, and all the current missions that we've been playing all year are still working under that system, and what they've managed to achieve is obviously quite impressive given that fact. Ongoing work is fixing all of this and will bring that tool system up to speed and let the mission guys off the chain, or on the chain as it might be, so they can segment missions off and forking directions and tie outcomes into the economy and so on. Crafting. There is still a lot of work left, but the tech preview wasn't a complete meltdown, and even a success, you could say. It might even be in a patch pretty soon, possibly 4.7, possibly. They are very, very hard at work trying to lock all that in. The inventory rework is likely to be in for 4.7 though, and it's starting to look like that original concept that we've seen. The speed of rendering in items, or the lag as you try and open up an inventory, was in some sense due to a full 3D render of each item trying to pop up, which is obviously crazy. They're iterating on that massive progress though, and they seem pretty confident that it'll be in for the next release. I'm guessing each item will be replaced by an image or representation that will speed everything along. Instancing. That's where we take an area of space and separate it away from the main game into its own little bubble. They have a true instance back-end manager complete and in place. I don't know if that means that we are running on an ad hoc one currently, but I hope so, because I am sick of seeing you park your ghost ships in my face when I'm taking off. This manager will take responsibility for player caps and party caps and the life cycle of these instances, so that's all good. Teams are working on how players will get into and out of these instances now. Transport will play a role, it seems, and they mentioned elevators or some other forms of transitions. The manager itself may want to be able to change what area or level you're loading into, or the design team might want to introduce items or data on your player that act as a key to unlock the same location, possibly running a different scenario or higher mission. The network capabilities for this have already been added, so it's coming along smoothly. Adding flags to your character that allows you to stream in instances have become deeper, so that you might travel from one instance to another instance and not just a single one like we have now. The first example of this in the game will be the Siege of Orison Redux, which I am seriously looking forward to. The content cadence, as previously stated, will be every 2 months going forward. Basically everything that was shown at SitCon last year is still intended for release this year. I've went away and had a quick look at that, so I can fill you in on what that might entail. So we're likely to see a lot of mining related content in the Glyceum Ring, perhaps everywhere else as well. Tactical strike groups, which was an instance space for big scale combat missions. A capital ship was in trouble, there was an armed station with a central energy core, and you had to blow it up basically. All very Star Wars looking. There was impenetrable anti-capital turrets that would need powered down and stuff. It looked awesome. FPS teams would then be able to enter it, and I think waves of Vandal would show up, and they even bring their own capital ship. So yeah. The Rockcracker mission, which seems to be a bit like Hathor, you board the station and complete a bunch of objectives to activate a laser, which cracks open a big geode essentially. You can then fly in and start mining. These were also instanced, if I remember right. Levski Municipal Works, where there's some shenanigans going on in the underbelly of Levski. Mining, salvage and refueling missions were mentioned, and lastly Planet Tech V5, which will initially roll out on Nix and then be moved to other systems. Next in the vid, Benoit spoke about regional servers. They are in the process of a pretty large migration of how they host a game. Not much else was said though. VR came up next. Nothing much was learned other than what we already knew, which is that Sylvan is the man. Also buy a Pimax VR headset from my link in the description. Basically, all the decisions Chris took to take the hard path and build things from scratch are now paying massive dividends in VR. But the work there on VR isn't really taking work away from something more important elsewhere. More Twitch drops are coming, apparently, so keep your eyes open for those. Next, we spoke about economy exploits. Our strike team is and has been on it, exploring potential exploit vectors, since we are a game in development but also a live service. It has become apparent that building a framework to deal with exploits is going to be necessary, and this team just basically goes around trying to confirm these fixes. Even minor exploits have a big effect on the game, and they are having to look at possibly placing limits on selling, inventory caps, exchange limits, tracking player trades and large purchases. Basically they can't tell us what they're doing as a tactical response, but that it sometimes may involve letting the exploit evolve to see more data about who's doing what and what other bugs and exploits can crop up. Being an alpha game can afford this sort of freedom to let things run and give enough rope to the exploiters to hang themselves basically. As regards a wipe, there are no plans for a wipe. CIG are going to take a bunch of targeted actions because work needing done on those exploits is still not completed. The Battlecruiser is coming. It is going to be from a tried and true manufacturer. Invictus would be a good time to expect it, and I think he meant the concept, not the actual ship there, for obvious reasons. And it's a very, 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 very big ship. Genesis has been conjoined with 2 other aspects of development. Obviously the planet tech itself, but tied into that will now be Starchitect, which deals with settlements and buildings and landing zones and things like that. This will give designers control of the scale and distribution of these things. Population management is the next one, and that will all come under one strike team. So instead of AI being hand placed, the AI manager will consider the server capacity and try and distribute them better, but also spawn them more selectively for the right jobs. And it should be a far better and scalable system overall. CIG is planning to advance peripheral support, where certain data will become accessible to peripheral manufacturers to help them be able to tailor more when they build products relating to Star Citizen. I have no idea what they're specifically referring to there, but if this means we can get a few hooks into the dynamic files of the game, this would be absolutely massive. Say for example we can actively read when the landing gear is down and have our peripherals acknowledge that with LEDs or whatever. This makes that flow of information go 2 ways instead of the one way it does now. And they also mentioned motion platform support, so sending out signals from the game that could direct a sim rig which direction to move its actuators without depending on our own flight stick inputs, as those two are not always connected in what you should be feeling as you're flying around. Spawning was the last thing. We can spawn in hangars, spawn in ships, and they are now talking about spawning in place. So wherever you logged out, you can log back in and that's where you'll be. As long as nothing's changed and you can still physically spawn there. As always, an amazing show from Benoit, where a lot of grievances get put to rest and there's a nice update of where things are at, as well as a few things to be excited about. Always love these shows. Appreciate this guy so much for taking the time to do this, and he's always so straightforward, doesn't dodge questions, doesn't waffle, just gives you the real ups and downs. Anyway, I hope that was short, sharp and sweet and to the point. Thank you for watching. 07 guys.